All right, and we are
Hello,
live.
everyone.
Hello, everyone, and happy Friday. We appreciate you all being here. So, as you can see, it is just the faces of Cindy and I currently right now. So, Dr. Tony Hampton, we have touched base with him already, and he is going to be here. But as you know, the profession of a doctor definitely it can put a damper when you have other things scheduled, which is absolutely okay. But he will most definitely be here. He is just going to run just a little bit late, but as I said, that is certainly okay with us. But I do have anyone that has asked any questions already, I do have those marked on this end. So we'll be sure to get to your questions. So let's go ahead and just address some in the chat over here. So here we have Robin, Carnivorous Grandma. Love this so much. Yes, I am so super excited. I know Cindy is as well for us to have
Yes.
Dr. Tony Hampton join us this evening. And just get fit. I do have your question saved here, so we will definitely get to it once Dr. Tony Hampton arrives. But yeah, so excited. Thank you, Dr. Hampton, for all your valuable information. Yes, absolutely. Okay, and this chat, it may get a little bit hectic, which is okay. We are definitely going to roll with it. But as Cindy's saying, please, if you have any questions, please put that Q in front. That way it would help us definitely easy identify those questions that you all have.
Yes. It definitely makes it easier to pick them out.
All right, and then here we have Don. I believe it's pronounced Shonger. Hello, thank you so much for being
Hello, Dawn.
here. And then here we have Lynn. Happy Friday evening, Sana, Cindy, and all. Thank you, Lynn, so much for being here. Here we have Meeting Wellness, who we
This
are going
is
to have.
Christy.
Yes, we're going to have a future interview coming up with her. So we are super excited for that.
Yes. And I'm going to be with them, with her and Ellie and Lindsay on the 17th, I believe it is.
And then here we have D. Lee, which is Donna. Hi, Sana, and hi,
Hello,
Cindy. Hello,
Donna.
hello. Thank you so much for being here. So if anyone has anything to ask Cindy and myself, I know we're definitely going to get a lot of newbies that are not familiar with Cindy and myself. So Cindy, if you want to go ahead and just tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your journey, for anyone that might be new here, while we're
Yeah,
still
while we're
waiting on
waiting for
Dr.
Dr.
Tony
Hampton.
Hampton.
Yeah.
Exactly.
My name is Cindy. I'm 65 years old. I started keto 3 years ago and 2 days ago. It was my 3 year ketoversary a couple days ago. I am down 100 pounds. I have actually 100 and what did I tell you, 130 from my highest ever. But since starting keto, about 104, 105. I have reversed the pre-diabetes. I have gotten off blood pressure medicine after about 50 something years being on them. Hey, Dustin. And I just feel good. I better than I have in my 30s, 40s. I have two sons that are in their 40s and 6 grandchildren. And whew, it's been a chore. But it's been great. I go more towards ketovore.
Hmm.
Most of my meals are carnivore, with the exception of keto chow. And yeah, that will stay in my diet for sure. And yeah, that's about it in a nutshell. That's pretty consolidated. What about you, Sana?
Yes, I will address Dustin as well. Dustin, thank you so much for being here, listening in while you are multitasking with some shopping. Here we have Donna saying, yeah, Cindy, she's giving you some thumbs
Thank
up and some
you.
applause. And then here, Lynn is telling you, happy Ketoversary, Cindy, you rock.
Thank you, Lynn.
She absolutely does. But yes, so I was 4 years keto as of January of this year. I did have some hindrances on keto. So this is nothing against keto because my family, my two children, one is going to be 7 in about 4.5 months now. And I have one that's going to be turning 15 the end of October, as well as my husband. They still continue on with keto. So 4 months from now, they're going to be 5 years keto. But unfortunately, keto was no longer working for me. I did have some hindrances on keto. So I did make the decision because anything that you're on with the way of eating that's available in this community, such as keto, ketovore, carnivore, it is all proper human diet. We have to keep that in mind. So no one is doing any which way um, incorrectly or that they're not doing the best way of eating. All of those ways of eating are the best. So I did not have any problems at all switching to carnivore. I was okay with that. It was something I personally needed, as well as my body, my mentality had needed. So, just kind of in a nutshell, I will be hitting 9 months carnivore Sunday. So, October 1st will be my 9 months. And I am currently down 109 pounds total between my keto, carnivore journeys combined. So, I'm super excited for that. But I have been able to heal so many different things. I had back pain, hip pain, thigh pain. I had heel spurs that were causing me limited mobility, that I could hardly even leave the house without limping. So many different things. I had IBS, which is irritable bowel syndrome, which also kept me like a prisoner in my house. So thankfully, I was able to basically heal all of that. So I know we are mentioning how much we have lost in terms of the weight. But, as Cindy has mentioned for her personal journey and what I'm mentioning for mine, it is definitely the non scale victories that will always supersede anything the scale will ever tell you. So I feel that that was like the best for me was the healing, to be able to walk normally, to be able to not have IBS symptoms that kept me a prisoner in my house. You can never have any number on the scale make me satisfied more than the healing that I've experienced these almost 9 months now. I forgot. Oh, 7 years was on the 11th of this month. Congratulations. That is amazing. The time really does go
That's
by fast.
awesome,
Wouldn't you
Dustin.
agree, Cindy?
It does fly. It's like when I started keto, my sister got me started, but I knew it was going to be a forever thing. So I was ready. My mindset was there. My why is in place, and that's my husband, because keeping him on track with his type 1 diabetes is more than anything. I mean, he's type 1 and his A1C is better than it's ever been. And that's my biggest reason, not to mention my own health. But he's definitely it. He's got other things going on that, yeah, that make me stay that way.
Oh, thank you so much, Lynn. You are definitely a good spokesperson for healing with this way of eating, Sana. And that is what I mention it so much as far as the healing, just as Cindy does, because we want some to realize, especially the ones that are newbies to this way of eating,
Mhm.
whether they choose keto, carnivore, ketovore, think back, to some of our journeys, the scale is not always going to tell us what we want to see. That does not necessarily mean that you are not healing. It does not necessarily mean that you are not doing keto or carnivore or ketovore the proper way. It does not necessarily mean that it is not the best way of eating for you. It's just think of what you were eating prior to that. Our bodies need to heal. It is like anything else. When someone is going through a detoxing phase and when you are on an addiction, you have to go through a healing, a detoxing phase. Once
Yeah.
the body heals, oh my goodness, will those better health goals start to be achieved? So we just really need to focus on try to stay consistent. Don't worry about perfection. Just try to keep consistent with the way of
Keep it
eating that you're choosing.
simple.
Yes,
Keep it simple.
that is the key
Because
right there.
that's the only way it's going to be sustainable is if you keep it
Embrace the
simple.
simplicity.
And
Absolutely. I could
I
not agree more.
it's just incredible. When I was started very strict keto, 20 grams total carbs or less for 90 days. Now I am the world's worst chocoholic. I didn't have anything for the first 90 days. Nothing except the regular keto approved foods that you made yourself, not this box garbage that you buy in the stores
All right.
or any of that. After that, I started making the egg white bread because, I missed bread. One or two
Yeah.
carbs after you make it yourself, I'm good with that, you know? So it's like, it's just, it was so easy for me. And I was so fortunate. I never got sick like the keto flu. I never had any issues. No foods bother me whatsoever. That could be a hindrance. But
Mhm.
I did 31 days of beef, butter, bacon, and eggs, and I went full force back to it. And I have maintained this 100-pound weight loss for a year now. And, it's like I just feel great.
Yeah, and that's huge, being able to keep consistent with that. So this is JP. I'm gonna be 50 in 1.25 years, and I want to parachute on the ocean or mountain. That is amazing because that is what it's all about. We do have our better health goals, but then once we achieve those better health goals, we have other goals that we can set just for life in general because being on a better health journey, you definitely have that ability that you're gaining to start to achieve other things in life, to truly live your best life. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
Overcoming carbs. Hello, all. Hello. Thank you so much for being here. We hope the week has treated you well. So, Dustin is saying when I started, net carbs was the way, total carbs was crazy. Yes, because the net carbs, let's think back to where the net carbs were coming from. That was coming from the marketing, and that is what made keto get into people's minds. So, in a way, it's kind of like a catch 22. It had its benefit, but then it also had its downfall, that it was able to get people to be aware of keto. It's just necessarily the net carbs allow them to eat more of the processed keto items versus the real food. Carnivore dog sitter Becky, hello, hello. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Becky. She's
And
going to
we
be on
also,
too.
yes, we'll also be having Becky on. What is for dinner? So, Cindy, you want to go ahead and go first?
This is easy. Nothing.
Now
Nothing.
you see why I
Water.
let Cindy go first.
Water.
So Cindy is intermittent fasting, so that is why she's having
Oh,
nothing
I
but
do
just
that every
water.
day.
Yes. So for me, I have not ate as of yet, but I did sear up some picanha, so I'm super, super excited for that. I simply just quickly seasoned it on one of my breaks at work. I do work from home, so that's why I have that little bit of advantage that I was able to just season it really quickly. And I seared it up literally before coming on the computer. Cindy, you're
Thank you,
getting some
Donna.
applause from Donna here for maintaining. And then here we have JP. So far, I've lost 7 pounds, only gained back 12. Well, that's the way it goes sometimes. And if you are paying attention to the scale, put that scale away. Try to take measurements. The measurements will usually never fail you when it comes to those non-scale victories.
Right.
So here we have Robin. I have an event tonight, but wanted to say I will be back to watch the replay. Awesome. Thank you so
Thank you,
much. We
Robin. I
certainly
just subbed
appreciate
to your
you.
channel too.
Looking onto big parachutes. Well, definitely be careful with that. It's not something I could do. Could you ever go parachuting, Cindy?
No, I'd love to go for a helicopter ride, but I'm not jumping out of anything. No.
So, in that way, JP, you are more adventurous and a risk taker than us. I remember looking at broccoli and being like, how could that be keto without counting net carbs? Oh, wow. Yeah, it's really the marketing mentality of the net carbs. I'm making chili to take for a work pitch at work. I'm going to have fried chicken thighs and probably some of the chili too. Oh my goodness, I love chicken thighs. They are like my
Yes.
favorite cut of chicken. They're just so flavorful. But yeah, the chili shouldn't be so bad. Um, I mean, for me, you could be having worse than that chili.
Yes.
Oh,
Well,
here we
depending on what you put in
go.
it, it's okay. Do you know what I did?
Hello,
Hello.
Dr. Tony Hampton is with us.
Finally, finally. How you guys?
Welcome, welcome.
Good.
Man,
How are
I tell you,
you?
traffic in Chicago on a Friday, don't even try it if you haven't tried it, I wouldn't recommend it.
Oh,
It's not
We
good.
yes, we did let everyone know because we definitely understand the life of a
Absolutely.
doctor.
Yes.
that's
Sometimes
right.
you could schedule things, but those scheduled things, sometimes
I
you
it's
just
it's
life happens.
even on my way home, I get a call. One of the patients has a clot, and I have to, so you're
Oh
trying to figure out
gosh,
what to do. It's always something going on, and I guess that's why you need people to do this work. So I'm very blessed
I
to do
hear
it.
you.
So I wouldn't trade it for anything. So, but thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Uh-oh.
I don't know if you could hear me, Dr. Hampton, but I believe you froze.
Yes.
To my Wi-Fi. Maybe it's their internet
Y-
issues. So
You're
hopefully
There
you're
you
this.
back
go.
now. You're back
Yeah,
now.
okay, cool. Lord, please, let's not have that kind of night. So let's hopefully it'll go well.
Yes. Keep the tech
We know
gremlins
what that
away.
we know what that's like, huh?
Yes, yes. So, but thanks again for inviting, and hopefully we can get some folks to, ask some questions and help them understand why we're crazy about restricting those naughty carbs, which wreak havoc on our bodies. And we really want to encourage everybody, if you have somebody in your life who is suffering, they should at least have this as a dietary option. We've seen
Absolutely.
so many miracles. And again, we are totally comfortable with any dietary pattern that people choose. We just want them to have this as an option, because I've seen in clinic, I've seen in my own family, I've seen in the research and the literature that this is an option that everybody should be aware of. And if you do that experiment and you get a good result, then why not continue with that experiment long term? So it's been awesome.
Yeah.
Love it.
Absolutely. And we actually just had a little bit of discussion about that because I was just mentioning to everyone that there is no wrong method of eating when you're eating the proper human diet.
That's
So no
right.
one should be looking like anyone's doing one perfect way, whether it's keto, ketovore, carnivore. Something is going to work for everybody.
That's right. And your
And
And
as
body,
long as
exactly.
as
yeah,
long as they keep it simple,
yeah,
it'll be sustainable.
that's right.
That's what I have found to be the most beneficial way for me.
That's right. It's nothing wrong with there. You have different types of personalities, and the personalities may lead you to being more particular about what you want to measure. Some people measure. Most of my patients do not like, look at their ketones in their urine or in their blood. But there are some people who want to do that. I'd say most patients are aware of carb counting in the beginning because they find that it helps to educate them. But once you kind of know what foods do what, then you don't have to do that anymore. So I like what you're saying. Keep it simple. Uh, Stay in your. There's always things that you currently eat that are actually okay. You just have to move some of the things that are not okay out of your diet, but you don't have to go crazy and have some fancy keto recipe or
Right.
carnivore recipe. It's not that complicated. So if you keep it simple and you listen to your body, that is absolutely the best way to go. So I'm a big fan of that. And I see a question. This is a question.
Yes. So we have Get Fit here asking, so excited. Thank you, Dr. Hampton, for all your valuable information. Question: is having HDL of 111 not good? Is it a sign of inflammation? I heard Judy Cho mention that HDL over 80 may not be good.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is to I think it's better to think of it in ratios. And I think what I've seen in my experience is that if your triglycerides to HDL ratio is, ideally 1 when you divide it out, but less than 2 for sure, that's a pretty good indicator that you're in pretty good shape. Um, I definitely have patients who have very high HDLs. What I find in practice is that when I see that, I also see a 0 calcium score and some other
Mm.
things that would reassure me. So I think the bigger message here is more about how do you approach these numbers, and what I would say to anyone who's looking at data, always rely on the big picture, not on one particular metric, right? Because so much of this science is nuanced. And if you say to me, I have a person who's carnivore, and then I have a person who's a vegetarian, they may have completely different measures and outcomes with their numbers, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're sicker. If you see a carnivore with a slightly higher A1C, does that mean that they're less healthy? I would say no. So, so for me, I would make that one of the many things that you look at, and then you say, well, what about these other measures of metabolic health? Is my C-reactive protein or my SED rate, which are signs of inflammation, are those in the normal range or not? Something called the apoprotein beta A ratio, is that in a pretty good range? That's a
Mm.
great measure of metabolic health. We know we have the HDL, but we also have the triglycerides. Is the triglycerides, which is a very good measure of heart health, is that number in a pretty good range? And what about lipoprotein, small particle A, I mean, large and small LDL particles. So what I would say is let's look at some other measures of health, right? And if you take this person who has a HDL of 111, but they have a CT heart scan of 0, then do I worry? No. If their triglycerides are not elevated, no, I don't worry. So that's how I look at it.
Mm.
And maybe when Judy saw that, maybe she saw some data that suggests we should worry. See, the body is very funny. It doesn't like too much of anything sometimes. So maybe at extreme levels, there are incidences where maybe that's an issue. I have personally not seen that yet, but I absolutely think we need to probably maybe find out what resource you use to make that comment. But I bet you there's some data out there that would suggest that. But if the big picture is okay, I really wouldn't worry about it.
Awesome. Here we have Mary Ann. Does inflammation have something to do with your diet?
Yes, I know Mary Ann actually, and shout out to Mary Ann and her husband, who I know both of them, and I appreciate them, just taking the time to do this, right? I mean, they could be watching Netflix, they could be watching Suits on Netflix. I mean,
That's
wouldn't that be more
right.
fun? I can't compete with that show,
Especially on a
but
Friday night, right?
amen. And I'll be doing something like that when I finish with this live stream, with my wife, right? But at the end of the day, Mary, and you say this to your husband too, is absolutely one of the many things that can increase inflammation. And so we believe in the low carb, keto, and carnivore community that one of the best diets for inflammation to reduce it is this type of diet, because one of the things that happens with uh, a high carb diet is you have increased um, influx of macrophages. You have something called glycation. All that extra sugar is literally like gum sticking to things and causing inflammation. And your body sends macrophages and other inflammatory substances to those areas. So when you have too much insulin, you then have too much inflammation. Macrophages kick in, leading to that. Just like the inflammation you see when you hit your toe, it's the swelling and all of that stuff, all these inflammatory cells. And if you do that in your arteries, you're going to increase your risk for a lot of those vascular diseases like heart attack and stroke. In your kidneys, you can have kidney failure eventually. So if you start with your diet, that's a great place to start. Then you say, that great husband you have, is he getting on my nerves or not? And if he is, we're going to fix that. and tell him I said it, give him a hug when you talk to him. But at the end of the day, you want to have healthy relationships. You want to make sure that your stress level is reasonable. You want to make sure if you don't have control of your stress, let's figure out how to do that. They have apps out there like Calm that can help with stress. People meditate. Sometimes you just listen to affirmations. Sleep is so critical, right? So if you don't get enough sleep, you try to maximize that. I've written articles with the diet doctor about ways to improve your sleep. And obviously, if you exercise, you should, but don't over exercise. Don't exercise to the point where it creates stress. So you want to think about all of those factors. But if you start with diet, that's a good place to start. Now, that does not mean that low fat, vegetarian diets are not less inflammatory than the standard American diet. I would argue any diet is better than the standard American diet. But many of us who were in a plant-based world and then shifted to more of an animal, we found that we felt better, and we learned of things that can harm you in a plant diet, like anti-nutrients and things like that irritate people. In my particular case, it irritated my gut, and my gut was not happy. So long answer to a short question, but hope that helps, Mary.
Awesome. Great information. So here we have Christy meeting wellness. I've got an appointment to get blood work in 2 weeks. I have no prior blood work numbers. Female, 47 years old. Any test you recommend I ask for? Meat-based keto, February through May, and carnivore June until present.
Yeah. And I think the basic labs they'll always do will be make sure you're not anemic, make sure your thyroid's okay. And there's more specific thyroid tests that we could talk about, but I'm just going to keep it there. Make sure your overall lipids are okay. The only thing I really care about, honestly, is the triglycerides and HDL. And when you divide those out, you want the ratio to be less than 2. You want to make sure they check for the basics, like the insulin level, which is actually not a basic. It's actually very important. I would argue that fasting insulin level, which is not a perfect test, is probably one of the most important tests, because if you make too much insulin, you increase your risk for metabolic syndrome, metabolic disease. These things include hypertension, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and cancer, et cetera. So if you want to really, in one swoop, understand where you stand, I would get a fasting insulin level. Your doctor will automatically, not mention that. So you have to mention that. And you may want to also mention, outside of the lab, is that calcium score test I mentioned. Now, if you want to get more detail, let's just say you do a cholesterol test and you're like, ooh, the LDL is high, and your doctor's freaking out. You're not freaking out, because I'm telling you not to freak out. You can also get a particle size, the large and small particles. The large particle, less of an issue. And the small particles, that tends to get into the crevices of the artery and increase risk for heart disease. So, but the LDL particle test is not a standard test. The apoprotein B to A ratio test is not a standard test. Set rates and C-reactive protein, which is an inflammatory test, those are fairly standard. Of course, you're going to get a A1C And so I think you want to lean in those directions. I think if you're saying standard test plus one, it would be the standard test plus insulin. And then you can decide based on your cholesterol test if you want to get a apolipoprotein, BDA ratio, particle sizes, etc. So that's kind of where I would start. And if your health system offers the heart scan in our health system, which is Advocate Health, we offer it for just $50. So that test is the most predictive test for a future heart attack. And the heart attack is the number one cause of early death. So get that information. And the insulin level, speaking of cholesterol and LDL, is 6.7 times more predictable of a future heart attack than a cholesterol and a LDL. So the insulin test is huge. So that's what I would focus on.
Great information. Christy,
Yes.
definitely advocate for yourself, because just like Dr. Hampton mentioned, doctors get busy, and I'm speaking as the daughter of a doctor.
Wow, didn't know that.
So, yes. Unfortunately, he's passed. He did pass away, but still yet, he will always be my favorite doctor.
Well,
But
it better
still
be.
yet, doctors get busy. I know it firsthand. They get busy, and rightfully so. They're going to order what they feel they should order specifically for you. But if you have an interest in seeing certain numbers, mention it. Not a lot of doctors are going to tell you no, because guess what? Your insurance is the one that's paying for it.
Right.
I got a
You
question.
got something to say?
Yes.
Well,
go ahead. Shout it
I
out.
had asked my doctor for a fasting insulin test. And he said, well, if your glucose and your A1C come back okay, why do you need that? And he wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
I can answer that. It goes back to what our good friend was just saying. They order what they're familiar with.
Mhm.
And most doctors in conventional training, and I certainly didn't get this training about insulin, would not know what's kind of obvious to most of us when you think about it. So if I have a pancreas, and for everybody checking us out, right under your left rib, right? If I have a pancreas, which via the islet cells are making insulin, and let's just say I decide to eat a diet high in carbs, the average American is probably anywhere from 250 to 400 carbs a day, right?
Easy.
Your body is amazingly efficient at figuring out how to manage that in the beginning. But just like any of us, you're going to get tired. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're making a lot of insulin to maintain your blood sugars, right? So what the doctors weren't taught is that just because your blood sugars are okay doesn't mean your insulin's okay, right?
Oh, I'll
So
tell
what
you, I
happens
went
is,
with him. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
so it's doing that. It's just right. It's like a big machine. It's going and going and going and going. And eventually, you start getting what we call insulin resistance. So you'll keep making a ton, but it won't work as well, right? And then you keep making a ton anyway.
Right.
And eventually, so your insulin has already started to spike, and your sugars are normal, and your A1C is normal because your body is so beautifully made, right? But then eventually your insulin levels is going to start going down because the islet cells are like, I can't make anymore. I'm tired. And when they stop making enough, then the sugar is going to start kind of going up. So you'll see as the insulin starts to go down, the sugar starts to go up. So this is the beauty of the insulin test. And it's not a perfect test. You can predict diabetes because of what I just shared 5 to 10 years in advance. Wouldn't you like to know that? Wouldn't you like
definitely.
to know in advance and then you can say, and then you can do what the guy that has the Beat Diabetes YouTube channel says. He has Mike the Meter, right? And he talks to his meter will tell him what he should be eating. So if you see things spiking your sugar and you just got told that the insulin is high, you eat something. If it spikes your sugar on your meter, you stop eating that. I mean, it's really that simple. You don't even have to have a list of foods. Your meter, if you're a borderline or diabetic, will absolutely tell you. So what you do is you start making these lifestyle changes now instead of waiting until a doctor is trying to, introduce medicines to your life. So at the end of the day, doctors are not taught about insulin as a standing order for patients,
Right.
and it's not standard of care yet, but it should be.
Well, I had Dr. Barry's book with me when I went to the doctor, Common Sense
Nice.
Labs. He said he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Of course
And
he
I'm like,
doesn't. Of
really,
course he
dude?
doesn't.
Well,
Right.
I'm
Really.
changing doctors.
Right. Well, and that's
I
it. And
am. I'm
we try
changing.
to work with your doctor until they show that they're not working with you. Like this is a collaborative relationship. So
Mhm.
if I'm in a collaborative relationship with partners, I need you to hear me and I need to be able to hear you. And then we compromise, right?
Right.
So and my compromise would be, listen, doc, I don't expect you to understand the value of insulin, but you're a customer. So as a customer, I
Mhm.
would like to be able to get this lab, and I will use other resources to interpret it if you're not comfortable with that. But absolutely, Dr. Barry is not just a not knowing doctor.
Oh, I
He's
know.
brilliant.
He is.
Exactly. So I'm
And
shout out to
he's,
Dr. Barry.
yeah, I'm
Yes.
definitely changing doctors, but other reasons than that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
understood.
that just really bothered me. It was like, but he refused. He just flat out refused. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah, I work with people. I may not be like, let's just say Ozempic, for example, right? If I may not be a guy who's gonna promote Ozempic, but I work with people. If somebody comes to me and they've struggled, they've been coached, they've tried
Mm,
lifestyle, didn't work, I'm not gonna be a doctor saying, no, I can't do that because I'm anti-Ozempic. I work with people. Everybody on their journey will need different tools to be successful.
right.
I find that 95% of my patients don't need medicines like that, but I'm also a doctor who works with people, meet people where they are, use your expertise, but let's work in partnership. And that sounds very simple, but you'd be surprised how many doctors respond the way your doctor did.
Yep.
Absolutely. And, you've touched on it right there. It's being discussed as a last approach. If that's
Mm,
really truly what they need, you're advocating for it. But then
100%.
again, they need to be willing to
Right.
see if everything else failed.
Yeah.
So no,
That's it.
that's key right there. Here we have overcoming carbs asking, as a family doctor, how do you address parents that want to put their kids on a low carb diet, and at what age should kids be introduced to this way of eating?
Well, we learned from our professor Tim Noakes, right, in South Africa, that you got to be careful when you send a tweet out there saying that keto is okay for kids, right? Well, maybe not so careful, because experts like Nina Teicholz, who wrote the book Big Fat Surprise, were able to easily win that lawsuit when people came at Professor Tim Noakes when he said it was okay to do keto as a kid. So the answer to the question is, eating animals and non-starchy vegetables. I want to pause for a second and ask, does anybody who's checking us out tonight think that sounds harmful? So if I give a steak and some broccoli to a child, is that harmful? I just don't understand how that's
Mm.
harmful. So I think we live in a world where we're so indoctrinated into our culture where, oh, the kids should be able to eat what they want, right? And the irony is that the kids are the ones who need essential amino acids and essential fatty acids more than even we do. So instead of feeding them garbage, we should feed them the essential nutrients. And is it okay for a kid who's in a keto household to go to a party outside that household and break the rules during that time? Probably okay. So we don't want to be so crazy about this. But what I found when I interviewed Dykeman, who was a gentleman whose son is a type 1 diabetic. He actually started the type 1 grit Facebook group, which is for type 1 diabetics who all have A1Cs in the 5 and 6 range, which is amazing. And he finds that when his son was younger, David, I think is his name, David had no problem being around other kids and from a social perspective. So the question becomes, would you want your child who's, in this example, has type 1 diabetes to do what the other kids do and then have to deal with the high and low sugars and have to go see the school nurse? Would that be more embarrassing than a kid who's able to, self-monitor, self-control his behavior? He knows what to feed himself, and he may not eat the pizza with his friends, but he's also not going to see the nurse because he's having low and high sugar. So I think it's all about perception. And what they find in families that are trying to do this themselves, it's best to just have the whole family do it. And this is a very healthy way to eat for everybody. But you don't have to be as, kids are resilient, so they may have a little bit more wiggle room. They're not the ones with the diabetes and things like that. So, but just as a simple answer, there's no reason why a child can't do keto, low carb, or any of those dietary patterns, because they're just eating the, as Dr. Kinberry would say, the proper human diet. So it's totally okay.
Absolutely. And I can vouch for that because both of my kids, they are on keto. So come January of next year, they will be hitting 5 years keto. I have one that started when he was almost about 10, and I have the younger one. He went straight from breast milk to the keto way of eating.
Yeah.
And they both are doing amazing.
And they will do amazing. When my kids adopted this dietary pattern, they went up an entire point in their GPAs, both of them.
Oh, yeah.
If you want an alert, focused child who's not sleeping in class, this is definitely a dietary pattern to consider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I completely agree. And funny enough, like I've heard people ask and say to me, "Oh, well, aren't you depriving your kids? You must be depriving them because they're not able to properly live their childhood." And I said, "Because of what? Because I am not poisoning them with sugar, because I'm not giving them the processed products that are out there that are loaded with chemical ingredients and all these funky dyes."
Right.
Yeah, no, if I cannot pronounce these ingredients, I know now I should not have been eating them myself,
That's right.
nonetheless giving it to my kids.
And if we circle back to David, the son of Dykeman, he is not just a thriving young man who's a type 1 diabetic with an A1C that's like usually less than 5.6. It's like 5.1 or whatever. He's the quarterback of his college team. Now, do you honestly think a type 1 diabetic who's at risk for hyper and hypoglycemia is not thrive? You should look at him. He looks like he's a bodybuilder.
Wow.
You actually do the opposite of taking away. You actually give it their lives back to them, and they can do the things that not only that the other kids are doing, but they actually do it better because their sugars are level when the other kids are just on a roller coaster, and it affects their mood, their ability to concentrate, focus, and again, just be happy. And you're just happier when if your sugars are happy, you're happy. That's what I found. That's why so many people in this community talk
Absolutely.
about their mood being improved. They're less anxious, easier to be around, less depressed. These are real outcomes of eating this way. And again, it's I arrived at my clinic at 6:30 in the morning, and only thing I've eaten today is some ribeye, and I don't feel tired. I still feel mentally clear. I'm 55, and I feel like I'm 25, whatever that feels like. It's just people have no idea what they're missing out on. Mhm.
No, absolutely. I've been up since 5 a.m. this morning,
Right.
and I only do OMAD. I only do one meal a day. So just, just water for me is what I've
Yeah.
been having. I have not ate yet for the day. And could I eat? Yeah, most definitely could I
Yeah.
eat. Am I starving?
No.
No, because I have now been able to associate with what is hungry and what is hunger,
Right.
which is
Right.
definitely absolutely very, very important. So we have Lloyd Sneed Sr. asking, "Are Home Chef dinner healthy?"
Oh, I don't know if I've tried that particular
Yes.
brand. Are you familiar with it?
I've certainly heard of it. It's
Okay.
very much like HelloFresh. Um, but I'm not sure if they were also one of the ones, because I know one of them, I can't remember which one, but they did have something that was available that was either a low carb or keto. Um,
I'm gonna take a quick search, but um, I see there does appear to be a low carb option, right? So I think going back to what I said earlier. So when I was in obesity school, because I'm board certified in obesity medicine, they taught us that meal replacements were one of the most effective ways to help people on their journey to lose weight. that's partly because we're so busy, right? So, I mean, we take advantage of air fryers and things like that. My wife was here earlier than me, so we have food. But for a lot of people, it's just too much. So if you find that meal replacements are helpful for you, absolutely. Then you say, okay, let's look at my options. I wouldn't just do, you know, any meal replacement. It does need to say, particularly if you're on the journey we're on, that is there a low carb option? They probably won't have a keto option or a carnivore option, but you want to find a low carb option if you're not carnivore. And then what you do if you're pre or diabetic, you say, well, let's see what the meter says. So if the meter says that works, like we mentioned earlier, keto chow. And I find that when people use keto chow, it doesn't bother their sugars. But if you see something with keto or low carb on it and you eat it and your sugar still spikes, I don't care what it says on the label, that's not good for you. So I'm pretty sure that if Lloyd does an experiment with that, and then and it works and it's within your budget, then I think that's okay. I don't really care how you get to the goal. I just don't want you to have diabetes, hypertension, and all those chronic medical conditions. And if you need support and you prefer that over my air fryer, that's totally okay.
Yes, I absolutely agree. So I would just research if they have it available for whatever meal you're selecting. See if you're able to look at the ingredients, or even
Yes.
don't be afraid to call them and ask them. If you're having any sauces or anything that is like a package ingredient, that it's not real food, that
Right.
they're packaging it kind of like a sauce or any sort of oils or anything like that, don't be afraid to ask them and tell
Yeah.
them, "Oh, I have some sensitivities. Can you get more in detail of what is in there?" Because
Yeah.
understand some of these companies, what
Mm,
keto is to us and what
right.
we know keto should be
That's
is
right.
not the way that they are basically portraying
That's right. Especially
keto,
the
right?
seed oils, right? The seed oils.
Exactly.
And for those who are checking this out, when we say seed oils, we're saying it can say vegetable oil on it, but if you look at that label, it'll probably have like soy seed that was converted to oil. Now imagine, I don't care what kind of seed you're talking about. Imagine taking a seed, right? And trying to turn that into oil. What do you have to do to that seed? You got to process it to death. Now imagine taking an olive or a coconut and smashing it. You'll get oil automatically. So if you're going to use a plant oil, it should probably be along those lines. Now, us carnivore-ish people, we don't mind bacon grease and lard and beef tallow and all of that. So, and we feel that that's better because again, it's a natural oil that didn't have to be processed.
Oh, absolutely. We have D. Lee Donna. Doctor, do you think that it may be possible to reverse plaque in arteries with a strict carnivore diet?
Well, I have to kind of put on my Dr. Eric Westman hat. This is my Xavier college hat, but I'll put his hat on for a second. And what Dr. Eric Westman would say is we don't have any randomized controlled trials to support the statement that a carnivore diet will reverse artery plaques. What we do know 100% is that if you reduce inflammation, and that's what the carnivore diet will do on your behalf, then it's likely that there won't be any progression. We use the term regression when it gets better. And in a lot of ways, that's not too bad of a situation. If you reduce the inflammation, it doesn't progress. If it doesn't progress and it's stable, meaning that it's not breaking off into pieces and causing a stroke down the road, then you're probably okay. So that's why we want Dr. Sean Baker and others to do research so that we can verify and validate whether or not this question is legit. Would I gamble and say that it's probably going to do that? I'd gamble and say that, but we need some science to support that so that we can say with confidence to the masses that this is a true statement. But you will absolutely reduce inflammation, and you can prove it because you're going to do those set rates and C-reactive proteins and all the tests, some of the tests we've mentioned. And if you see your insulin level going down and your triglycerides going down and your HDL going up, you're probably doing exactly what your body needs. So that's how I would approach this. We want to be very careful in the keto and low carb community. and make sure and carnivore that we are speaking truth to power. Some people think we're quacks already. So the last thing we want to do is put quackery out there. We don't want to oversell our diet. We want to say, this is what we know, and this is what we don't know. And the thing that, so what, and if you go, like they just had the documentary, I did a video on my YouTube channel in the Blue Zones, it's okay to say there are centenarians, people who live to 100. These are things that they do that increases their chances of having a long life. But what you don't want to do, which is why I made the video, is to say they are plant-based communities when they're not. That's just a ridiculous statement to say that the Blue Zones are basically plant-based when they're eating a ton of pig and a ton of other types of animals. So I just want us to live in a world where a carnivore and a vegan can sit at the same table and talk about things with honesty and be okay that their way is not the only way, and get rid of these everybody eats plants on Mondays and Fridays, like in New York with the babies, right? The babies can't eat meat, because if we flipped it the other way, we would think that would be ridiculous. We would say, how dare.
I believe we lost
We lost the
Dr. Hampton, your
audio.
audio. I can still see you perfectly fine, but the audio just cut out.
Ooh, hear me?
There,
Yep,
there you
there
are.
you are.
Okay, I tell you, this technology. I've had some issues with StreamYard lately with my mic and stuff, so I don't know what's going on. So yeah, so I think at the end of the day, you want people to be able to make choices about what they think is best for them, and no logical person would disagree with that. Like, it's
No.
okay to, that's so funny. It's okay to have an opinion about what you find based on your research is best for most humans, but it is disingenuous for you to suggest that that's the only way that everybody has to eat. And I don't want everybody to be a carnivore. I don't want everybody to be keto or low carb, and I certainly don't want everybody to be a vegan or a vegetarian. So let's figure out what's best for you.
No, absolutely. And I also feel, within this community that should be proper human diet, I feel like there is a lot of separation between the keto folks, ketovore folks, and the carnivore folks. But then again, we are supposed to be one proper human diet community.
Right.
But then again, there still is separation. And, I've even mentioned this on one of my videos before. I don't have anything against any vegans. Just me being carnivore. Carnivore is what I had to do for me. As long as no one comes at me with any negativity because I'm choosing to do carnivore, everybody got to do for them. It's
That's right.
everybody's individual life. What you choose to do for your life, you and yours, got nothing to do with me. I
No
gotta
doubt
do
about
me
it.
and let everybody do them.
Well, that's like when we started these lives, we said right off the bat, it doesn't matter how you eat. We're in this for everybody to do what they've got to do for themselves. And there wasn't going to be the negativity about keto versus carnivore or whatever, because it's crazy.
Yeah.
No,
It's just
absolutely.
crazy. It's
It can
childish,
be.
is what it is.
Here we have Adventures of Hope and Andy RV Life. So this is also Mission Keto. They do have this RV Life channel as well. But
Nice.
here they are asking, what do you recommend to folks that have been on long stalls? And hello, everyone.
Yeah. So the first thing is, let's not, we got to be careful what we're measuring and how we're determining what success looks like, right? And what is a stall? Sometimes, particularly with carnivore, a stall has a little to do with I'm still losing fat, but I can't tell because I'm gaining muscle. So the first thing is, am I actually stalling in terms of my progress? And what I would say is, if you are exercising with your carnivore keto journey, you may be just gaining some muscle finally. And so all these metabolic changes are occurring. The next thing I would say is, you got to make sure it's clean. So when people come to me and they're struggling a little bit, I always make sure I tend to do total carbs. So we're talking about low carb and keto now. I'll say, listen, if our target was 30 or 20 carbs or less, I make sure it's a clean version of that. And so we may not be doing a lot of keto products at that point, because I find that some people stall because they are eating keto products, let alone the temptation that comes with that. Sometimes when you eat those products, it tempts you to eat the foods that you've been trying to get away from in the first place, because those little spikes in insulin are really going to increase your desire for those things that they love. Now, I also will tell people, if they're keto fat adaptive and they're used to doing their thing, I'll say, listen, maybe it's time to start the intermittent fasting piece. So if a person has not done that before, I'm going to ask them to start doing that. And then I get very practical, because I got the protecting your nest theme. And I say, okay, what's up with the nest, the E is for exercise. I say, don't over exercise, because over exercise is stressful. I say the S is for sleep and stress. So I'll say, let's look at the sleep and stress piece, so that we can make sure that you're getting adequate sleep and that your stress is not creating any problems. So I guess, those are the types of things. I also refer people to resources. I know Amy Berger has a book, about weight loss stalls, right? And so Amy Berger's book, she's also the person that wrote the book about dementia, Alzheimer's Antidote. I would actually refer them to resources, just to kind of, because a lot of this is problem solving, but those are the things that kind of come to mind right away.
No, very good information. I'm the same way. Measure everything. Everything is data, not just the scale alone. So if you're only measuring the scale
Yeah,
as the, tell all be all that you have a long stall, are you measuring, do you have more better health goals that you're trying to reach that you have not been able to reach them?
that's right.
Measure everything.
Everything.
Yes,
Everything.
absolutely everything. So I'm going to get to this one first here, because it is a super chat for you, Dr. Hampton. So
Yeah.
$20 from Homestead House. So this is Carrie, I believe.
Yes, Carrie is
Love what you
amazing.
are doing. Yes, Dr. Hampton, life changer. I have a big family gathering tomorrow, and I often encounter skepticism or curiosity about my choice to follow a carnivore way of eating. What's a polite yet informative way to respond?
Wow. Yeah. Well, I think, Carrie, first of all, everybody should go to carnivoredietmovie.com and support the work Carrie is doing. He just happened to be gifted with movie making skills. He's probably going to make us all better YouTubers. So I really appreciate his skill set in that field. Uh, but so what I've always done in the past, because I love my mom and she makes the best dressing in the world, and she's like, you can just have a little, right? But for me, a little can lead to a very unhappy belly. So um, so they've seen your transformation. I think Carrie's lost. I mean, I saw his before and after picture, so it's got to be 100 pounds. I mean, or something close to that. So I would focus on your story, and so when people come to you and say, "Man, I don't know that that's a good idea, Carrie," your answer is, "Man, I've never felt this good ever." I know that on your channel you talk a little bit about your mood and how there was I think I've even seen you put in front of you a whole like bag of medicine, like a container. I mean, literally looked like there was 20 things on it. And I think you keep that near where you record, because you want to remind yourself and others of where you've been. And so you say things like, I've never had more energy. I've never had more mental clarity. I've never had, to not have to worry about taking medicines every day and the side effects that come with it. And what I find is, when you tell your story, most people will kind of lighten up and say, man, I do have concerns about saturated fat and all these things I've heard about, but man, if you're doing that well, I think I'm going to have to stop pushing. And you may even want to mention, if you've had labs to reflect the change, you may say even the labs I've done suggested I'm moving in the right direction. So that's how I would handle this, because I think it's very important that if we personalize it, and then we say to people, wouldn't it be nice, if people were allowed to do their own experiment and find out what's best for them? If they need more information, well, the American Heart Association, the American Diabetes Association, and the Endocrine Society, they all have endorsed at least keto and low carb. And you say, well, this is a form of keto and low carb. And I went to the extreme because what they found, particularly for the situation you were in, that they have that study, keto for refractory mental illness. I would go to my phone and say keto for refractory mental illness. And instead of pulling up the study in that setting, you may want to pull up the image, and the image will say that 100% had improvement in there. This was depression, bipolar, and schizophrenia, and it would be more in the
Mm.
depression. 100% had improved symptoms. 96% had weight loss. 46% were in remission before they left the hospital. Now, do you understand when a person goes to the hospital with depression, they're not likely to be in remission. They may be better. They were
Right.
on the verge of suicide, and they left the hospital in remission, meaning that the symptoms went away. And then another, like nearly 50% were on less medicines when they left the hospital. So I would pull up that study and say, this is who I want to be. And in that study, they were doing keto, but that's essentially most people, in fact, Dr. Georgia Ede, who is one of the authors, Dr. Eric Westman also, but Dr. Georgia Ede, who's one of the main authors, she's a carnivore too. And she's a psychiatrist who trained at Harvard. So, I mean, at some point you got to say it's all about what's happening to my body. But if you want some data, I got something for you. So you got this, my friend.
Absolutely. And I can be testimony to that because I did suffer from clinical severe anxiety, depression. I was in a very deep, dark place, and I come out fully transparent to people that it was so bad that, yes, I was suicidal. And just like you're saying, Dr. Hampton, I don't consider myself healed. I am still a work in progress every single day. Every single day, even though I will never question suicide ever again because I know that I now have perspective that I should have had before. But then again, every single day that I do choose to live,
Yeah.
I'm still a work in progress every single day.
And
Yep.
critically important for everybody to understand that people don't like the term reverse. And one of the reasons why I don't like reverse is because
Yes.
if you go back to the standard American diet, this stuff comes back. If I go back to the standard American diet, my irritable bowel is coming back. So if you're gonna have this amazing benefit, it's important to know that it'll probably be a lifestyle change forever.
Mm.
However, with the right support, and part of that support is this community. When I was asked to come to this interview and question and answer, why did I not hesitate? I didn't hesitate because this is a grassroots effort. And if we all don't participate, somebody's family member will succumb to some so-called chronic medical condition that they never needed to have. So we all play a part, whether you're sharing this, whether you're creating a link tree so you can have the favorite influencers, or if you start your own YouTube channel, we all have a role to play. And that's why we take the time to spend time with you on an evening like this. And that's why we're also going to support Carrie with Homestead
Mm.
How, because he's actually, 102 pounds, my goodness. I mean, you know what I mean? So what can you say to a person? What
Mm.
doctor would see a person lose 102 pounds? Their numbers in their labs get better. They're not depressed, not taking a bag full of medicines
Right.
and think that's going to kill you. Stop doing that. And that's the sad thing, is that they do that. So let's stop this nonsense. And until we have some evidence to suggest that what we're doing is harmful, let people heal and stop telling them that they shouldn't do the things that help them to heal.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good approach as well. When people are curious, because I've had some that are curious about what I'm doing because they see me changing.
Right.
They see, oh, I wonder what she's
Mhm.
doing. I lightly explain I'm doing carnivore currently right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that simply means I'm just on a meat-based way of eating. I don't use the word diet. I say I'm on a meat-based way of eating.
That's right.
And I focus on what has healed. I don't tell them what they have to do
That's right.
because not everyone's going to be interested in the same kind of meats.
No,
There's definitely a lot of variety when it comes to carnivore. But for me, I think it's more important instead of telling people what they have to do,
that's right.
focus on what they can heal and just
That's
say, oh, like Carrie, for example, I'm down 102 pounds eating this way. I was able to heal XYZ. Can you
right.
believe this?
That's right.
That's why I
Mhm.
choose to eat this way. Don't come across, oh, I'm doing carnivore.
That's
Carnivore is
right.
the best. You're eating poison, you're eating garbage. No, we have to come across people with a delicate approach.
Right. Yeah.
We cannot, make it seem like we're part of like a CULT
That's right.
mentality.
That's right.
We have to tread lightly with people. It's going to make people more so ask more questions to you
That's
later on. You
right.
might overwhelm them at first, that they might just be like, oh, okay, thanks for telling me.
That's
But
right.
guess what? That person's going to have an aha moment where they're going to be like, you know what? I just maybe had an appointment with my doctor. Things didn't go so well. Carrie, can you tell me a little bit more about what
That's
we
right.
discussed that day that allowed you to heal, that allowed you to be down 102 pounds? Because best believe everyone has their aha moment to make a
Mhm.
change.
And
Yep.
and I find most people will come to you when they see. So what we do more than anything is to model for
Mm,
people, and most people will see that change, and they will come to you and say, "Man, you always happy. You're always energetic. What's up with that?" And then you can say, "Well, I think it's because I just had ribeye." And, I don't crave ribeye like that sweet potato pie I used to crave, but I definitely enjoy it. And I think and I learned that that saturated fat's good for my brain. I learned that saturated fat actually reduces my risk for a stroke. You may have not heard that before, but that's what
right.
the Journal of the College of Cardiology said.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
it's deep. So yeah, I think it's nice to model for people and just allow people to come to you. Now, in this setting, we have a different audience. We're preaching to the choir. So
Right.
in this audience, we may go a little nuanced and answer more nuanced questions, but you kind of know who your audience is and you speak to that audience. If I'm speaking at a conference, a medical conference, I may use slightly different language in that setting. But if I'm speaking to my 75-year-old, patient who, didn't get training in nutrition, I may speak a different language to her. So, yeah,
And this question actually leads into that because we do have, and show me some grace if I butcher your name, but Latoila
yeah.
Jones. Hi, Dr. Hampton. How would you recommend the switch from a plant-based diet to a carnivore diet?
First of all, I love your hairstyle. Let's go there first, okay?
Yes.
Love that. And I think that it is a pretty dramatic change. And I think I would start with just reflecting on what types of animals have I liked in the past? So a lot of my patients end up they kind of ease into it with the seafood approach first. They ease into that and they'll say, well, I'm gonna start eating a little seafood and do that for a little bit. And because the problem is, protein is a little different than plants in that to digest it, you need a little bit more acid, right? So sometimes giving your body a little um, support in terms of time is probably better to ease into it. Now, don't get me wrong. I have plenty of patients who do a 360 and they just go head, first into it. But I think if you want to go from that. You got to kind of get used to the textures. When I was a vegetarian, because I was a vegetarian for about 7, 8 years, I was eating Impossible. I don't even know what they were called back then, but they were like the equivalent of a Impossible Burger or Beyond Meat burger. And so my brain was kind of used to that texture. And so it didn't like freak me out. It didn't seem gross to me when I started to switch. But so I think I would start with like seafood. And then as you start to eat protein, kind of test your stomach and say, if I eat, 5 ounces of steak, for example, is that tolerable? If you find that it's not, then you may want to do one or two things. Just take more time to ease into it. And some people literally buy supplements. You can actually go to Amazon and buy like acid supplements to help you digest, to add more acid to your diet. But do I see that happen often? Not really, because most of my patients find that that transition is fairly smooth. So I would just kind of ease in that way. I don't have to deal with this question a lot, but that's how I would kind of overall approach it.
Yeah, and we applaud you for considering because, that could be for some, it's not so easy to
Yeah,
self-assess
right.
to make a change, especially depending how long she's been plant-based.
It's a big change. And also why, I did it because going back to the blue zones, I thought the blue zones were the gold standard of longevity. And I found that they weren't really just plant-based.
Mm,
I thought the China study was the gold standard of nutrition. And I found it was just they did a lot of leaps of faith with that research. For example, uh, they use in mice casein, which is like milk protein,
mm,
and when they gave it to the mice, right, they found that there was an increased risk for cancer. And but then they said, oh, since casein is a animal protein source, then all animal protein must cause cancer. So that's a leap of faith. That's not science, and that's just absolutely untrue. So once I learned that the things I relied on, like the blue zones information, the um, the the information from the China study, and I found that the some of the authors, like Dr. Joel Furman, who is well known in the plant-based community, that they were disingenuous. Some of them were doing studies and not putting out the correct data. They were actually literally
mm,
for the lack of better words, lying about the data. I
mhm,
said, man, you can't trust people. You need to,
mhm,
and then when you look at studies, it needs to be a quality study. It can't be these observational studies where we observe things and then we make some kind of conclusion. You can't do that. And when I started looking at the data that was correct, I found that it was not a plant-based diet that was optimal. It was more of an animal-based diet. So, and you'll find that if you search, I think Healthline did it. If you just search Healthline, time to end the fat, they look at all the low carb and low fat studies and compare them, and there's no comparison. The low carb studies win. And then when you look at, or you can do it, look at the Public Health Collaborative. If you search that, low carb versus low fat, it's not even close. I mean, it's almost laughable that they would even compare the two. So we already know which diets are the best, particularly for weight loss. But it's important that people understand that this whole low carb keto stuff is more than just weight loss. This is not a
mhm,
fad diet. This is a diet that has been proven in scientific studies to work. This is not no short-term diet. Dr. Eric Westman's been doing low carb and keto since 2002, and he's still doing it, and people are doing. Nobody's, falling off the map. So this diet is good for so many things that it's a long list, and I think people who are checking us out need to understand this is not just about weight loss. I've never had a weight problem my whole life. I did it because I had a stomach problem. And I have
mm,
patients who are doing it because they have lupus, some autoimmune disease. And then I got patients who are doing it because they have, mental health issues. And they're doing it for that reason, particularly carnivore. And then I have people with neurodegenerative diseases. Maybe they have epilepsy and things like that, and they're doing it. Some people are doing it because they got keto for cancer. So listen, the benefits are beyond comparison. So if you want to get return on investment, and have something that you can do that's one big intervention that can make the biggest difference in your life. I cannot think of anything other than this that will do that.
No, great information. And I agree.
That's awesome.
I'm kind of a little hesitant to read certain studies now
Right.
because recently, with a lot of studies, it's not like what it used to be. The way everyone, you know, all these years ago when
Right.
keto, low carb was around, it was not a market. It was not saturated
Right.
with everybody trying to have their basically hand in the cookie jar.
Right.
So sometimes when you follow the paper trail with certain studies, you discover, oh, okay, so and so company was the one that conducted the study because
Mhm.
possibly they have a personal interest to sway the study to their favor. So I think, watch YouTube videos for ones in the community like Dr. Tony Hampton, like Dr. Ken Berry, like Dr. Westman. Um, Getting information from a source like this, we are so fortunate. And I see the little logo here for YouTube. So you are on YouTube. So, yes, I like to revert to the YouTube videos to get
Yep.
the information because you're also able to get other things done around your house as you're
Yeah.
listening to the YouTube video. You can multitask.
It's
You're
a
not having
trust
to
but
be
verify.
glued. Yes,
Trust
you're not
but
having to be
verify.
necessarily glued to that electronic, but absolutely, you're
Yeah.
hearing it straight from a reliable source,
That's right.
and you can't get any better than that.
And then when you do your own little experiment, you'll find that you'll do really well. So absolutely agree with all of that.
So Brenda Foley's asking, will he be at Ketopalooza?
Yay. The answer is
So will I.
oh, well, I can't wait to officially, shake your hand officially in person.
Yes.
When I spoke at Keto Orlando, it was really nice, and I just kind of talked about how I kind of got from where I am to this whole carnivore thing, what kind of led to it. When I spoke for the Symposium for Metabolic Health, that was in August this year, I talked about how carnivores and vegans can live in harmony. So that was an interesting conversation.
Yes.
Uh, but at Keto Palooza, and I'll actually be preparing my slides probably this weekend. I'm going to actually try to see the world through the lens of a patient. And so when I'm faced with a patient, what do I need to think about when that person's in front of me? But it's not going to just be focused on like what's the best diet, how to get started.
Mm,
It's going to be like when what would potentially be a reason why they would struggle, and then how do I think about that as I face their challenge, and how do I help walk them through that? So, and I think that's one of the greatest things we can do for our friends, family, and others is to understand that we all want to be healthy and be here with our families. We all want to thrive and be successful, but when we struggle, we don't want to struggle, but
mhm,
there's a root cause. And so our job as friends, family, and me as a clinician is to walk with people when they struggle, tell them, give them grace and say it's okay to struggle. In fact, you should expect it. And here are some things you can do to get through that struggle. But if you don't understand the root cause of why people struggle, you will look at them and assume things you shouldn't
mm,
assume about them.
Mm.
And so my job is to remove all of this messaging around. You just gotta, I mean, this is not, I'm not Barry Sanders. I'm not just trying to get the guys to play a little harder this weekend when they play, right? And good luck with this weekend because it's going to be tough. It's really about you saying to that player, man, I noticed that you were, having a hard time getting up to that speed. Is there something, what's
mm,
going on? The next thing you know, oh, it's something going on my knee. And oh, by the way, and then you say, well, let's fix your knee. Oh, I noticed that your quads are weaker on the left and the right. Let's get a TENS unit on that quad and strengthen it. And then maybe we have to understand the root cause. And that's my
mm.
job as a clinician. That's your job as a family member or a friend of someone you know. So that's how I approach this. And that's kind of why I think it's important to share that message at Keto Palooza.
No, that's super. And I'm not trying to get preachy with anybody, but as you were talking, it reminds me of, just, in life, biblically it said, if he will bring you to it, he will bring you through it. But
Yeah.
then again, we also have to think of that also like as an analogy that could be used for this way of eating.
Yes.
Those within the community inspired us, motivated us to bring us to it. Whatever it was, it could have been keto, ketovore, carnivore. But what do you truly need to get you through it? And that's going to be different for all of us to keep us
Yes.
consistent, not to be perfect, not to achieve
Right.
perfection, but to keep us consistent. So that's going to be huge.
Yeah.
Oh, so here we have Get Fit, just adding an addition. Phew, thank you. My HDL/triglycerides ratio was 0.5.
Yes. I love that. And that's a pretty good number. When you're less than 1, you're golden. So you're in pretty good shape. And I really appreciate you sharing that because you can now rest and not be so worried, right? And that's really important. So keep up the good work, and again, divide your triglycerides by your HDL. Get that less than 2. Hopefully, it'll be as good as this. This is pretty doggone good.
No,
Now I
that's
have a
awesome.
question, a
Yes.
personal question. At my last blood work, my triglycerides were 39.
Mm-hmm.
My HDL was 73. Everything was great. I had a CAC score done, a CAC test in June of 2022,
Mm-hmm.
5,552.
And let me ask you this.
Sure.
First of all, your ratio is like similar to what was just shared, right? Probably
Right. It's 0.53. Yeah.
exactly. So, but the triglyceride to HDL ratio is a moment in time, and the benefit of having a number like that is over the course of time. So the question becomes, at what point did your body get into this low inflammatory state that it appears to be in now? And so that's the question, because how many years have you been doing this dietary pattern?
3 years.
Okay.
3 years. I
And
had lost 100 pounds within 23 months.
wow.
And I had that test done after that was already completed.
Yes.
So it was June of
Absolutely.
2022. Then I caught a live with Dr. Berry and Dr. Ovadia. And I asked a question about the CAC score, and Dr. Ovadia says just use that as a baseline because I hadn't had one before, and go for another one.
Yeah.
So I went a year later, stayed the course, what I've been doing for the last 2 years previous, almost 3 years. And my score went up to 61.27.
It went up.
It went up. But I also found out that typically as you age, and I'm 65, it will go up 20% every year. That's what one of the doctors that I had asked a question of had told me on one of the things. It only went up 10%. So I said, okay, it could have been worse, but it freaked me out so bad. Could this have been of all the years of battling high blood pressure?
Yeah.
Could that be the cause of it?
I would say, based on what we know, that is the answer, that it was your previous history, because when you have high blood pressure, high blood pressure is a insulin resistance problem, because if you have hyperinsulinemia, there's a couple of things that are going to happen. Number one, you're going to have insulin resistance. And when you have insulin resistance, that's going to then make it very difficult for your endothelial cells, which are the cells that line your arteries, to make nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is what opens up your arteries and make them dilate. So number one, you're going to have constricted arteries because you're not making nitric oxide. Number two, the hyperinsulinemia is going to lead to a couple of things. One is going to disrupt your calcium channels, and that's going to cause constriction. It's going to lead to retention of salt from in the kidneys. That's going to increase the volume of fluid in your arteries. And going back to what I mentioned earlier, it's going to lead to inflammation. So macrophages are going to go into those arteries and cause inflammation, all of which are going to lead to hypertension. So all of that over the course of years is what leads to your body saying, I'm trying to fix that. So and the biggest mistake we make about cholesterol is that cholesterol is there to do repair work. They're like the fire trucks. So they're supposed to go to the house and put out the fire. They're supposed to tuck point the brick house instead of not stucco the brick house. If the house is inflamed too much, it may stucco the house, and now all of a sudden you have a brick house that looks like a stucco house. So over the years, because of the hyperinsulinemic state you were probably in, you have built up the mortar around your arteries and stuccoed what should have been a brick artery, right? Now, once you have that mortar on the wall of the house, it may be easier for things to stick to it because you've already put that there. But having reduced the inflammation, I still predict that eventually you're going to start to see, as you've seen a slowdown, you should see a stabilization where it doesn't continue to progress. Again, we need more studies, but all we can really do is reduce the risk factors that led to it in the first place. So if we assume that hyperinsulinemia was the risk factor, there is no better way to deal with that than to not eat the foods that raise your insulin. So I still think you're on the right track. You could argue, and this is how you have to frame this conversation, that if you had not made this change, then
I'd be dead probably.
You'd be dead or on your way. Seriously. So you
I
have
know.
You have to frame
I know
it.
that it puts me at the 95th percentile of having a heart attack.
Yeah.
And I know that. That's a realization. And I also know I battled blood pressure issues for 50 years. But I don't anymore.
Yeah.
I am off of all those meds.
You've
And
done everything.
it's like it's such a great feeling. And I feel good. It doesn't matter, but I won't have another one of those tests done.
That's right. And
because I absolutely freaked out.
Oh yeah, it'll freak you out. You need data, and we talked about that earlier, but you have to put it in the context of your big picture, right?
Right.
So in the context of your big picture, you're in a pretty good place. And I still believe that 10 years from now, 15, 20 years from now, we're going to be having this conversation with you on the live stream. So
I'm going to hold you to that.
That's right.
You heard it, Sana. And all you in the chat, you're my witnesses.
Lots of witnesses.
Okay.
But yeah, that has been like, and I kind of figured it's the blood pressure thing that caused it all those years of.
You could argue diabetes
it's such
is
a dangerous thing.
Yeah. Diabetes may be the worst thing for heart disease, but hypertension is right there.
And I've never had diabetes. When I first started keto, I asked my doctor to check my A1C. When I first started, I was at 269.9 pounds. I had never had my A1C checked, and it was 5.8. Within months, it was down to 5.4.
Wow.
My last blood work, about 6 months ago, it was 5.1.
Okay.
So, I'm like, everything else is good except that daggone CAC score.
Yeah, but you're going to be okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just happy you found it in the nick of time. Yeah.
Yes. My husband probably is too.
So my friends, we are going to take one more question, and then we are going to have this come to a close, because the benefit of doing this way of eating is to be out there living our best lives, not to be stuck all night behind our electronics. But we have Mike asking, are you seeing new patients? I am in northwest suburbs of Chicago and I want to have a GP that promotes correct nutrition.
Absolutely. And again, another stellar image of a follower, and I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm still, my panel is not closed yet. I am
Awesome.
south in the city. What a lot of people who have patients all over the place, what they'll do is they'll do a face-to-face, and then they may do some virtual visits for convenience also. So that's what I would recommend. So the answer is absolutely. And I'm with Advocate Health. So if you search my name, Dr. Tony Hampton, Advocate Health, you'll find my office on the south side, and you should be able to look into that. So not a problem at all.
I'm moving to Chicago.
I get out of here. That's
So
because of that
here's an
promise I just
update.
made.
I'm in Schaumburg
That's
and I can
Yes.
easily travel if needed.
Yeah, that's not too bad. Yeah. I mean, it took me forever. That's why I was late. I mean, it takes forever to go anywhere, but yeah, so it wouldn't be a big deal. Absolutely.
Very, very cool. Well,
He's coming to
everyone,
Kentucky, though, so I'll see you next
yes.
weekend.
That'll work. I'll be there for sure. I can't wait for that.
Yes.
Well, we absolutely want to thank everyone for being here because for this being a Friday night, you can certainly be doing anything with your time. But the fact that you gave a little piece of that Friday night to spend with us, we certainly appreciate each and every one of you for being
We
here.
sure do.
And a huge thank you to our guest, Dr. Tony Hampton. Cindy has been linking
Yes.
his channel throughout the live stream. So go ahead if you have not showed him
Yes.
some love in the form of a sub, please go ahead and do so. You will not be disappointed. But yes, again, Dr. Tony Hampton, we absolutely thank you so much for being here and just
Yes.
being a amazing advocate for this community. We
I'll
certainly
continue to do
appreciate
it.
it.
Thank you. I feel privileged to be part of the community. So thank you guys for inviting me, and let's continue to do this work every chance we get. I thank everybody for participating. I'm gonna go and find my wife and some whatever concoction she put together, but it better be some animals on that plate.
Yes, because
And I'll
I'm
be
about
hunting
to
you down
dig
next
in.
weekend.
Yes, I
No
seared
doubt.
up some picanha before coming on this live stream, so I'm certainly
Nice.
looking forward to that.
That's right.
Yes.
All right,
All right.
guys.
Well,
Take care. Thank
have
you
a
so
good
much
night. Thank
again.
Have
you
a
so
wonderful
much,
night,
Dr. Hampton.
everyone. Take
All right.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.